Hey there, how's it going? Phil Vians here, explaining his final project for CSC 110. I'm going to try and go through this a little bit quicker because the last two videos I've done have been well over 15 minutes and they won't go to YouTube. So, I named the project Tess and Alex Make My Final Project Pop because they did an awesome job. So the very first thing we're going to go ahead and do here is set up the scene. So import a turtle, and then from math I imported square root, and I'll explain why I did that in a second. Went ahead and set up the turtle screen. I did the title as Tess and Alex Make Phil's Final Pop, and then I named them T and A just to kind of shorten it for the actual functions that I was doing because there was a lot of work there. To make them render as fast as I knew how to, I just did their turtle speeds as 0 just so that they went through it very quickly. And then to start off, their fill color were dark blue and dark gray. Tess was dark blue, Alex was dark gray, and then the entire grid is about 540 units. So to split it up into 72 different small squares, it was 7.5. And then this function for s times square root of 2 is so that it was the hypotenuse of a formula of a triangle, and that was so Alex could do part B of that. And then for the entire thing here, their pens are up, and then color num equals 0 is explained for my color swap function, which you will see in a moment. But to begin it, Alex is pattern B, and that's this right here. And this part right here is where I use that hypotenuse formula, and that there is what L is equal to. So he does this entire perimeter and then does a 2 by 2 square right there. And then that's all explained right here. He does the edges 4 times and goes all the way around. And then this by in range 2 forward, and then S right 90 is this part right here. It's kind of like half of the square. So that's exactly how I was able to do that. And then he ends with the fill. This is a 135-degree angle from here to there, so that's why that's turn right 135. And then he goes forwards 3. And then does it moves to the center of it and then moves around 4 times to give it that big square there. Big square is basically putting his function and putting it on top of Tess. So Tess does a big blue square here. She moves forward 6 times, turns right 90, and that's when that equals 2. And then once she's done that, Alex comes in and does pattern B, and that's all of that stuff that's laid on top of there. Next, they move right. So once one of these is done, they're set up to go right here and then move right 6 and then do it all over again. And that's what that function does. And once they've done that 3 times, that brings us into move down. And they'll move down below, they'll go all the way back to the first square and then move down 1 square and then start another row. And then once that's all done, they move into next square. Next square positions the back up in the upper left-hand corner and then moves them over to the next 3 by 3 blocks so they can start the new square of the pattern. And then final pattern takes all of that together. It takes the big square, move right, move down, and puts it in a for loop. So the first for loop is for in range of 3, and that's once this for loop of range of 3 is completed, which is big square, then move right 3 times, and then moves down, and then does that 3 times. So that gives it this 3 times over, and then 3 times down. And that gives me the 3 by 3 square. Next, we implement the function. Next, we start the function color swap. And what I did here is I did an advanced state machine. I learned that in chapter 10, and I thought it was a really cool thing to do. So we do the global color num here, and this initiates the color num variable, and then we start the color num counter at 0. And then we have 2 if statements. The first one is once color num equals 0. Tess's fill color is dark blue, Alex's fill color is dark gray, and then it does the final pattern, which was that whole 3 by 3 square, moves on to the next square, and then moves on to color number 2, and color number 1, and then color number 1 is where Tess's color is dark gray and Alex's color is dark blue, so it switches it off. Does the same thing, moves on to the next square, and then again goes back to the state of 0, so it does the other ones all over again. So then I took all of those functions. Let me explain that. So final pattern is big square and pattern B, all in that, with the move right and move down, and then I implemented that, so that's all inside this color swap function. And color swap is inside of row. So what row does is it does color swap 4 times. Now this gives it this. So every time it completes a 3 by 3, it moves on to the next one and does that 4 times. And then once that's done, Tess and Alex go home, and then we'll start another row. Now, in order to get them to do two different rows, I did different row functions. So the first one has them go all the way to the upper left-hand corner of the pattern. The second one has them actually go all the way straight to the right. So once they go back to the center, they'll go straight ahead 270, which is half of the entire pattern, and they start it all over again. And I'll kind of explain that when we're doing the graphics, but basically it was the only way I can get it so that the color swap function would work coherently. And then for row 3, it pretty much goes straight back. And then for row 4, it does the same thing as row 1, but completely opposite. So as opposed to going backwards 270 and then up, it goes forward and then down. All right, final, once you have all of those rows implemented, gives us this awesome little thing right here. So this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. So in row 1, as you can see, they start in the center and they go up here and do row 1. And that in row 1 takes row, which is the function that does this, which takes function color swap, which does the blue gray, gray blue, blue gray, gray blue, which takes big square, which is these larger squares right here, and overlaps pattern B on top of that. And then after all that's done, I really liked the black lines on the pattern. I just thought they popped and looked great. So what I went ahead and did was I had Alex go to the center and then draw a perimeter of the black line all the way around it, and then draw an X by Y grid. And that's implemented right here. So there were 72 lines, 73 lines and everything. And so what we had him do was make 71 lines inside the perimeter graph and of X, and then he moves over to where he's positioned for Y. Basically, he just goes forward 1, and then does a 90-degree turn, and then he completes the Y lines, and he does that for a repeat of 72 times. So he does it really quickly. I'm actually really impressed with him. And the final outcome is this guy right here. So that includes row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and I put that in a bigger function of 4x4, which puts everything together. So once all 4 rows are created, it then does draw grid, and that's the final output right there. So that's the slideshow. Explains everything of what we had going on. I think I did a really good job at explaining that in under 13 minutes. It took a little bit longer the last couple of times. But what we're going to go ahead and do now is show you the code for my final project. So here's what everything looks like all together. I made sure everything had doc strings, and then explained everything that needed to be explained here. And then as you can see at the very bottom, that's where we have the final function of 4x4 and does all the rows. So we're going to run this and see what it does here. Okay. So, as you can see, they start in the center here, and then they move straight up here. That's function row 1. So that row 1 function is what moves them all the way to the upper left-hand corner here. Square B is the big blue box, and then pattern, or sorry, big square is the big blue box, and then pattern B is what Alex is doing right over that. And then all 3 of those is what gives it big square, and then it moves over to the next square and does the color swap. So they're moving so fast because I turned the turtle speeds way up. I know there was a tracer function for it. I just wasn't well enough versed in that, and every time I tried it, I couldn't get it to work properly. So I just wanted to go safe for this project because at the end of the day, I just wanted to try and do as good at the job as I could. So the fastest they can move on what my knowledge was with the turtle speeds being set to the max. And I'd done a couple of things where they were drawing a bunch of little squares to get to the lines, but then that was just taking way too long, and so I was able to speed up the process by having her draw one big square and then him doing all the patterns around it. And that's how I got what we were doing. So once this is done, they're going to go back to the center of the entire pattern and then straight up go straight to 70. And I did that because, as you can see, had I started the pattern with it beginning back here with row 2, that would have been exactly the same color as that. So basically what they're doing is they start up here in this corner for the first row, and then for the second row they start down here and then do the thing over that way. And then for row 3, they're going to go straight back and then be on the upper left hand corner of that row and go straight with that way, move back to the center, and then go down here and do the same thing as they're doing on row 2. Okay, we're at just over 10 minutes at this point, so I hope this hasn't been too dry for you, but I'm really happy because it looks like it's going to be under 15 minutes, which is good because I can finally post the video to YouTube. So this project took me quite a while to do. I'd say I spent well over a week on it, and then this last part where I replicated everything I did between Sunday and Monday, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So I just think that the color scheme looked really cool. That makes it look like a quilt at the end. So as you can see for the third row, they started here and then went straight back here, and they basically are replicating what they did in row 1. The first time I completed this entire thing, it took about 7 minutes for this to render, and that's when I knew I had to adjust my functions because it was just taking too long. And so, yeah, this one I think it does it in about 3 now, which is great. Cool, so then once this is done, this is basically going to go to the opposite side of that and come down here and then finish the final row. Bam. Cutting it a little close. We're at 13 minutes now. But I think we're gonna make it. Alright, and then once this is done, Tessa's going to go back to the center, and then Alex is going to draw a quick perimeter, and then do 72 lines that way and 72 lines that way, and it doesn't really take him long to do that. There he goes, and there he goes. Which I know this is an extra step that I didn't have to take, I just thought it kind of looked really cool once this was done. It just was a cool pattern. And like I said, the final product I think looks great, so I was really, really stoked about it. Awesome, and that is my final project for this class. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.